Welcome to Discovery Watch with John Kaiser.
I'm your host, Jim Goddard. I'm speaking with John Kaiser. John, welcome back to the show.
Jim, happy to be here.
John, Serengeti Resources went for a big run as high as 60 cents last week after releasing a couple of holes from its summer drilling program in Quanica. What was all the excitement about?
Well, Jim, I believe that the market saw the spectacular interval of sort of 514 meters of 0.64% copper and 0.8 gram per ton gold, which is considerably better than what GT Gold a couple of weeks earlier delivered for its North Saddle Zone, and the market simply hijacked the stock. The company reported the results for the first 3 holes of 9 that they drilled in the Quanica project in central British Columbia, where Serengeti and 35% partner Daewoo are completing a pre-feasibility study, which they expect to have done by the second quarter of next year. And so these holes are what you would call infill drilling holes, and they do not represent anything particularly new. The one hole where we're hoping to see something new, that was the deepening of hole 179, which in 2016 was terminated in new material at the base of the deposit where there were strong copper and gold values. And they did that for budget reasons. At the time, Serengeti was on the ropes and had been given just enough money from Daewoo to do a program, and they didn't push this hole to the limit. That hole they did deepen and push to the limit, but the Pinchy Fault, which cuts off everything to the west, suddenly showed up and ended that hole. So that hole did not really add anything. Now, there is an interpretation as to why this hole, which is similar to one of the very earliest holes, is actually quite important. While Daewoo and Serengeti were doing all their due diligence work and going over all the data from the previous PEA and drilling, they observed that the fabric of the vein sets was not exactly drilled optimally by the angle of the holes used to delineate the deposit. And this is important because if you strike the vein sets, the mineralized vein sets, at an oblique angle, you will not get a proper assessment of the grade. You actually end up with an understated grade. So these holes were intended to drill through the deposit at an angle designed to properly intersect the vein sets, which they can then use to refine their domain model for estimating the resource. So what this news tells us is that this newer interpretation is on the right track, and we may get an improvement in the resource, the copper and gold grade, that will be used in the pre-feasibility study. And normally when you go from a PEA to pre-feasibility study and get to a proven and probable or you indicated a measured resource, from an inferred resource, you end up actually getting a lower grade as they get more into the details. But in this case, this is a positive development because we could get an improvement of grade, which will help this project, which has been just on the borderline of being worth developing at the metal prices that we have today for copper and gold. So I've, to a large degree, viewed this as more an optionality play on stronger gold and copper prices down the road. But this development gives us hope that even if metal prices are still where they are today, this project will very well clear the development thresholds of the NPV at a reasonable discount rate, being better than CapEx, and the IRR above 15%. Otherwise, Serengeti, news is really scheduled for next year in June when they resume. They have now developed targets at both the Addy prospect next to the Chemis East project that Centerra now operates, and at Croy Bloom, which is an older project that they revisited this summer, where they have a big IP target that they hope to test next year. So getting the stock to run like this is a bonus because I would not have expected, in the absence of a strong increase in the price of gold, Serengeti to run like this. It tells you that the market is looking for new discoveries. I think it was a bit confused about this one. If this were a brand new target, the stock would not be pulling back as it is now. I think this morning it was below 30 cents. It would be continuing to charge higher in the way that GT Gold is, because until you know the limits of a system, S-curve action kicks in. In this case, we already know the limits of the Kwanika project. There is some possibility to the north of the deposit where there is a deep IP anomaly that they tested in 2016, but did not really hit anything substantial, but also did not properly explain the IP anomaly. But that is not part of the current pre-feasibility strategy of Serengeti and Daewoo.
We'll have more with John Kaiser right after this.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications, patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE, symbol CRL, and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Kaiser. John, last week, West Haven Resources traded as high as 92 cents on additional results from its Shovel Nose project near Spence's Bridge in British Columbia. Is Shovel Nose a new discovery?
I think Shovel Nose is on the threshold of becoming a very important discovery. The Spence's Bridge Gold Belt story is not a new one. It surfaced in that period of 2000 to 2005. Companies such as Strongbow had claims in the area, and they explored, but they never really delivered anything that could be delineated as a substantial resource. And in 2011, West Haven, which had gone public by IPO, which is very unusual on the TSX Venture these days, it acquired the Shovel Nose project from Strongbow Exploration, which has since gone on to redevelop the old South Crofty tin mine in Wales. And Gren Thomas is the key player there, and he's also the chairman of West Haven, with Gareth Thomas as the CEO, and the board is a whole bunch of well-known people such as Vic Tonaka, and the project advisors are all key epithermal experts. So since they went public, they have persisted with trying to figure out where there is a significant epithermal system within the Spence's Bridge Gold Belt, which for those who are not familiar with British Columbia, this is sort of the area around Merritt, near the Fraser River, where there's been a lot of placer gold found in the Fraser River. And finding the source of all this placer gold is a goal, a legitimate goal in this region. Now, what they are chasing in particular at Shovel Nose is the granddaddy of all low sulfidation quartz bonanza vein system, which is Hishikari in Japan. It was found in 1981 and eventually developed by Sumitomo. This deposit has outlined 11 million ounces of gold, running 1 to 2 ounces per ton. It's the most high-grade vein deposit in the world. It consists of 125 veins, 1 to 3 meters wide, quite narrow, typically each about 300 to 400 meters long, all within a 3-kilometer corridor that's 500 to 1,000 meters wide. And this deposit is only 1 million years old. It is a young hot spring deposit. But it is these very high grades which are the target at the Shovel Nose. Now, West Haven has been beavering away with little modest programs each year, never more than a couple thousand meters. The financings were all done similar to the IPO price of 10 cents. The highest was an 18-cent flow-through financing in 2012, and fully diluted, the company is now up to $92 million. And it has been a bit of a charity cause for Gren Thomas, who was the founder of Aber Resources, which went on to discover the high-grade Diavik pipes, which are still in production. Currently, this year, they have drilled 6,000 meters and 17 holes, and they did not do a financing at all. Everybody has stepped up and exercised warrants, this large overhang of warrants from all these annual financing. And Gren Thomas now owns 27%, about 21 million shares, so he is the largest shareholder of West Haven. And if you take today's 70-cent price, that's about $15 million worth of stock. So Gren Thomas is certainly hoping that we have a discovery here. Now, the focus in all these years has been on other zones, more in the northern part of the Shovel Nose project, and you would get these sort of lowish grade hits of gold and silver. Nothing ever really interesting. But late last year, they ended up focusing on the south zone, and they've got a high-grade quartz float in the area. There's evidence of alteration. So the drilling began earlier this year. The first sign that this was something better we saw in early May when they reported hole number 3, and it had 3.9 grams per ton gold over just under 18 meters, which showed that the grade's getting better here. But and the stock started trending up rather than doing its usual languishing around 10 cents and doing nothing. The stock started to come under accumulation this year. And October 2nd, that's when we had the first move. That's when they reported the second batch of results, which included hole number 12. And hole number 12 had a 1.65 meter or 1.6 meter interval that ran 175 grams gold and 249 grams per ton silver. Those are the kinds of bonanza grades that you want to see, and it doesn't matter that it's only 1.5 meter thick, because that's the nature of this beast. And in ordinary terms, this is like 5.5 ounces gold and 8 ounce per ton silver. And in this current bear market that we're in, where people seem to have given up that metal prices will ever go up, high grade is king. So the market jumped on that. But last Wednesday, on October 17th, they published more results, which included number 14, which is 300 meters to the southeast of number 12, and it did not have quite the high grades in it, but it had about 18 meters of 24.5 gram gold and 108 gram silver. So that's like just under an ounce gold and under about 3 ounces of silver. Now, although it's 300 meters to the southeast, the hole number 14 and 15, these were drilled more in a northeast angle. Number 12 and all the other holes were drilled from in a sort of almost easterly, just a bit southeast type of direction. So they are closer. They're trying to understand what is the geometry of this system. In terms of true widths, they're not very sure either yet, though they're thinking 90% is true width. But to get these sorts of grades in this sort of alteration setting, they seem to have finally homed in on a very pregnant epithermal system. And if you take the 92 million fully diluted at the current stock price, that's about a $57 million value for it. That may seem rich because we only have a few Pierce points, but it is the context of this story which makes this a very promising new discovery, and I suspect they can probably operate year-round there. They are gearing up for a November drill program. They claim that it is already fully financed from warrant exercise. I have not seen one of these financing announcements. So we will await the details. Hole number 15, which is 100 meters further to the southeast of number 14. That one has a 20-meter quartz interval. Visible gold has observed. I have not seen or heard to what extent there is visible gold, but if it is part of the same system, we will probably get some additional joy in a few weeks when we get the results from that hole. So I do believe that the Shovel Nose project of West Haven Resources is an emerging discovery and deserves our ongoing attention.
We'll have more with John Kaiser right after this.
I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the Pink CYDVF, and on Frankfurt C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with John Kaiser. John, last week you were in Montreal speaking at the Explore Quebec conference. What was your talk about, and was there any discovery buzz in Quebec?
The Explore conference is the Quebec smaller scale equivalent of the PDAC conference that happens in early March in Toronto. So there's a strong technical component. It is not really one where investors go to, analysts, fund managers go to, and they asked me to put together a presentation which gives us an overview of what is happening in Quebec. And I have done that. If you go to my website in the conference section, you can pull down the actual presentation. And then I've also got a link there, the Explore Quebec map, where I've got all the projects that I have tracked down for the that are focused in Quebec, and you can start exploring these companies. Now, there's a lot happening in Quebec. I was quite surprised by the time I'd finished all my research to see who was doing what. You may have heard of Plan Nord, and I was always under the impression Plan Nord has to do with the northern half of Quebec, which is this big, vast nothingness with a few iron mines in it. But it turns out that Plan Nord, which is this plan to develop infrastructure, is really about the northern half of the southern half of Quebec, and that's the James Bay area where Goldcorp has the Eleanor mine, and there is now a lot of activity going on in this area. There's companies chasing gold, there are companies chasing lithium and graphite. This is an area that has a lot of pegmatites in it, and it is quite underexplored. The Explore conference was held in Place Bonaventure, which is a kind of a grim Soviet-style concrete building, and even to get to it, you wind through all these corridors of nothingness, and when you get there, then you have a standard hall, and that's all fine. But it was an interesting contrast for me in terms of buzz. When I showed up, it was, of course, the day before the day that pot got legalized in Canada, and I was at the Sheraton, which was the official hotel for the conference, but it was also the place where there was the Activate 2018 conference, and this was a search and artificial intelligence conference, and also sort of data presentation, getting meaning out of data. And going up and down the elevator, there are people coming and going. You would see their name tags. These were people, they were excited, they were talking to each other. And as I left the hotel and gradually walked down to Place Bonaventure, it was like descending into a gloomy cave. And of course, we are back in a very bad bear market. If you look at the financing activity of the TSX Venture since about June, it has completely collapsed back to 2015 levels. The cannabis bubble kind of predictably had a peak on legalization day. It's been dreadful in the past few days. All these cannabis stocks are down substantially. But part of my talk was also explaining that, yes, from here on, now that it's legal, we should expect this bubble to fizz. We have the market starting to say, okay, let's see how profitable legalized marijuana sales actually is, and especially with the black market engaging in a price war and undercutting the legal suppliers, and so you would expect everything to gradually fizz. But the reality is Canada is just the staging ground for the legalization of marijuana in the rest of the world, in particular the neighbor United States, with a population 10 times bigger, where it is still illegal at the federal level. So whatever losses these companies are going to rack up over the next couple of years are simply going to be written off as a market development cost, just as was done in the dot-com days. So the mood at the conference was this kind of glumness. We're not part of any exciting wave. Everything else is going to keep sucking the risk capital oxygen out of the room. But while I was there, I started walking the aisles and seeing companies, ones that I may have heard of in the past, but not much. And I came back with more than a dozen really interesting junior ideas. The valuations are very, very cheap. I'll be introducing them as good or bottom fish value watch companies in the next while here, as part of my whole new setup for 2019. But the one company that stood out, that was creating buzz, is Midland Exploration, which is already a bottom fish run by Gino Roger, formerly of the Noranda Extrata world. And this company is sort of the replacement for Andre Gaumond's Virginia, which was the prospect generator focused on this sort of central Quebec area, the James Bay area. And they've been around since 2006 or so. The kind that they generate projects, they farm them out, they upgrade them, and that has made the company a pretty boring company, because the prospect generator farm out model really is as exciting as watching paint dry. But Gino Roger this year appears to have had his Andre Gaumond moment. And the Andre Gaumond moment took place in 2004, when Andre Gaumond, and my own personal experience was at the November San Francisco show that year. When I chatted with him, he said, "I have a keeper. I am going to buck the rule of always farming it out. I am keeping this." And he showed me the rocks that were from Eleanor. And then the stock was still, 70, 80 cents, which is kind of, Midland's a similar company, always in that sort of 60 to 90 cents range. Too cheap to make a no-brainer buy, but too expensive to really want to, say which project is it that's going to do it. And back then, when Andre Gaumond had his keeper moment, that earned him a sell recommendation from Paul Van Eden, who had been faithfully covering the company while it was pursuing the farm-out model. So that was priceless timing, and the stock eventually, over the next 2 years, disappeared at $14 in a takeover bid by Goldcorp. Now, in the case of Midland, what happened here was 2 years ago, they formed a joint venture with Altius Minerals to do a compilation of all the available data in this James Bay area. And they each funded it about equally. It could end up coughing up $1 million each. And what came out of this was 8 projects that they ended up acquiring. And in June, they said, we want to go forward with this, and Altius said, we don't really want to do this. Let's convert these into a royalty for us. We are actually a royalty company, and you give us some stock to compensate us. So they got back 100% of these 8 projects. And one of these was the Mithril project. And that one came on the radar because of one data point. In 2011, the Quebec governments had done a regional mapping program of, every square kilometer or so they set somebody down and they map the geology, and if they see any outcrop, which isn't most of the case in this part of Quebec, that looks interesting, they will take a sample. And one of those samples that they took was reported as having a very high copper grade. So when Gino's group did their big statistical compilation and started crunching all this data to see what was interesting, that about 50 targets show up, and one of them was these. So the boots were sent to the ground, and lo and behold, they did find that the GPS location was correct. They cracked open some rock and got semi-massive chalcopyrite in it. And so they have now reported a significant copper moly gold discovery, very high copper values. They're 2% plus. The gold values are running half a gram to 1 gram. Because this is old Archean rock, 2.5 billion years old, it's not quite clear what style of deposit. They're sort of thinking, well, it has affinities with porphyry systems that are copper, moly, and silver, but we don't really know. But what is important, that over a 700-meter stretch, they have found both boulders, highly mineralized boulders, and in situ high-grade outcrop. And so this now is the 100% keeper, and they looked around thanks to Goldcorp and the Eleanor project, you can actually get cell phone. When the crew was there on the site, they called back to headquarters and said, this thing is really, really interesting. We need to map stake now. And they had at least a footprint on top of that. They discovered, somewhat to their dismay, that to the west, the ground was all owned by Soquem and Azimuth Exploration, which is another one of our bottom fish. And Azimuth had formed a JV with Soquem, which is the government entity, to do also a similar data compilation. And they were focused more on lake bottom sediment, and they'd observed this significant bismuth anomaly, which they linked to the existence of gold systems. And so they had ended up acquiring a very large land position to the west. Unfortunately for Azimuth, they end up only with a 1.2% NSR down the road. So if there's anything substantial in that area, it'll be a while before Azimuth gets any joy. Soquem now will have 100% of this project. We'll either have to pony up taxpayer money or farm this out to somebody else who wants to do it. But Midland was able to look to the north and the east where the similar sort of rocks were available and tie up a substantial land position. They haven't really disclosed where and what exactly they have. But this type of discovery, potential discovery, it looks like it's an emerging discovery. It causes one to rethink, because there are no real high-grade copper gold deposits in this area. And if one finds one, then one has to rethink the geology and sort of say, okay, where else can we get this? And so from a single data point created by an observant field geologist doing government mapping work, and 7 years later, this was released in quite quickly in 2011. Nobody has ever bothered. And it just tells you how much interesting potential there is in this James Bay region. So I would say the Mithril project Midland is an emerging discovery, and that was creating the most buzz at the Explore conference, which incidentally next year will no longer be in that Soviet-style bunker, but it's going to move to the Queen Elizabeth Hotel, which is an old-style hotel, and that takes it back to like when this conference was held in Quebec City, when it was at the Chateau Frontenac, which is this beautiful old hotel, which when you went to it, you really felt like, okay, this is a mining conference. It's like when it used to be in the Royal York in Toronto, and in Vancouver, the Roundup in Hotel Vancouver. They're moving it back into a setting which might be suitable for the relatively smaller scale, but will certainly create a better atmosphere. And hopefully by this time next year, we have excitement of the sort that I saw at the Sheraton Hotel amongst all these young people involved in search and artificial intelligence, which itself is becoming more and more a tool in the exploration game. The old idea of the prospector having to stumble on a rock, and in case this is what happened with the Mithril project, it's more in the line of this predictive modeling where large data sets that are crunched and then the boots put on the ground to follow up, such as Azimuth. Jean-Marc Lulin of Azimuth has been pursuing. That is the wave of the future.
John, thank you so much for the update.
You're welcome, Jim.
We've been chatting with John Kaiser, his website, kaiserresearch.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on Discovery Watch are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any manner whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Archived online at HowStreet.com. Discovery Watch is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.